All right, welcome to Low Budget Visions. This is the podcast dedicated to celebrating personal DIY and independent cinema. And I am excited today to be joined by Hamish Downie. We had connected online a while back. He had given me a nice interview about a film I had made back in 2021. And I'm glad to be speaking with him again here and to hear a little bit about what he's been working on recently. So, Hamish, welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me.
As I was saying before we signed on, I'm a big fan of your films, and I think that so I'm really looking forward to speaking with you. I think this will be an interesting conversation. I wanted to start with just kind of a general question about, well, first, if you could introduce yourself, but also to talk a little bit about how you got into filmmaking, kind of your background with filmmaking.
Thanks. Yeah, that was a nice introduction. Um, I guess people on your channel have possibly seen your review of my feature film, Matcha and Vanilla, which isn't really a folk film because it's on a paid streaming service. But um, yeah, so I'm a yeah an indie filmmaker, I guess, who lives in Japan and I've been making films, like I'd say, like I bit the bullet back in 2010, which is when I got my first project to make a music video for an Australian artist called Robin Lowe, and um, and then I've been attempting to go the traditional route, the traditional indie route, let's say, and you know, I'm super inspired by all the folk filmmakers because especially like some of them have like made like 20 films in the space of time that has taken me to make like one. So know, I'm super jealous of like the creativity that people get to enjoy as a folk filmmaker. Um, so I guess my road to film, um, I don't know, like how far to go back, but like I guess I was always kind of more of an artist. I wanted to be an illustrator. I studied graphic design in college, but during during college, of course, in graphic design, we had to do a couple of courses like on making commercials, and it was something that I found really interesting. And and I'd always get I like any if I got time by myself to think, I would start coming up with ideas for movies or TV shows in my head. So um, and after college I started submitting them to there was a network that had an open submission platform. So I was trying to submit it to them, and so then you'd have that 6 week window of like, well, what's going to happen? And actually, they were always fairly encouraging. But then, you know, I guess maybe you know or don't know, but Hollywood tends to be, well, not Hollywood, but anyway, this is in Australia. But the big guys tend to be fairly encouraging. They don't tend to be discouraging. So, because they don't want you to think of them in a bad way, because 10 years down the line, you may come up with the next big thing and they want you to come to them with that idea rather than. But
Right.
anyway, at the time, I didn't know that. But it's just a lot of that, a lot of like, I'd sort of go up and then um, sort of, there was like an animation series that um, I really, I felt very passionate about. I had her, an actress who at the time was like at the top of her game in Australia, who wanted to be a part of it, and so that was kind of very encouraging. But when that fell apart, that's kind of when I, sort of hit the reset on my life and came to Japan. And but then after coming to Japan, I got super, um, inspired again, and then I started writing things again, and then um, I got to meet one of my mentors through a fan site I'd made. So this is going to, sorry, I had a podcast. Sorry if this is very clear to give you like a 20-minute answer to one question. Um, but like, like I'll try and be as like cringy as possible. Like, like back in the days of Web 1.0, I'd made a fan site for a filmmaker. Um, his name's Stephen Elliott. His most famous project is Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. And I kind of got in touch with the people around him through that website. And because, at 44, I don't have the same hubris as I did like in my 20s. But like at the time, I was like, oh, wow, would you read one of my things? And she was kind enough to do it. And again, she was super encouraging. Like, she said all the right things, like, writing is rewriting. And, she, like, what I thought was my most commercial idea possible, she was like, oh, this really reminds me of Napoleon Dynamite. It was like, okay, so maybe whatever I do, it's going to be very indie, I guess. So yeah, so I guess that's kind of helped with my direction. Sorry, that's
Oh, that's very interesting. It's great to hear how you came to filmmaking because I was
yeah.
familiar with your film, which I really enjoyed, Matcha and Vanilla,
Thank you.
and then being able to see your short films, and I'm going to go through those. We'll go through those in more detail in a few minutes. But I wanted to ask a little bit about, you mentioned that you are currently based in Japan. Uh,
That's right.
did you find any, in moving, did you find because you said from Australia originally, right, to
Mm.
Japan, did you find any like challenges as far as adjusting to making films in a new place? I know sometimes
Um,
even with just moving like from one city to another, it can be a big change as you connect with new people. And I was just curious if you could speak to that at all.
yeah, I mean, that feeling I had more when I went from Tokyo to Osaka. But yeah, I'd never actually made anything in Australia. Like I was just one of those. I was writing and I was submitting my ideas. And I joined the Writers Guild, and I was trying to make it. Like I was still in that mindset of like, I had my sights set on like the TV networks or all of that other stuff, and like like I kept being one of those people who like, oh, I almost made it, or like, oh, well, this is great, but we're going to go in another direction. Like it was, many years of almost, and which is again why it's so frustrating personally to see how folk filmmakers are just like sidestepping all of that and going, oh no, I'm just going to make my own stuff. Anyway, so yeah, moving to Japan was actually, I guess, partly because, um, yeah, like I didn't expect to make films here, but like I kind of had. I'm look, I'm a little bit new agey, so forgive me if I start talking about The Secret or whatever. But like I hadn't read The Secret, but that law of attraction thing, right? Like I came here with this sort of vision of like, okay, I'm coming to Japan and there are things I want to do. Like I want to get paid to eat on television. Like I want to, and actually moving to Osaka, I finally got to do that. I got to do be in a travel TV show, and yeah, I don't know. Like to me, like there was so many opportunities. I guess at a lower level, there is a glass ceiling of like when I started trying to again like the animation idea that I had. Like my idea was like, okay, I'll go to Japan and I'll try and make it there. And that was another almost where like because basically to do animation here you need a toy company, you need a production like a sort of At the time, this is going to say how long ago it was, but this is you didn't kind of needed these like a DVD rental company, like a Blockbuster,
Oh,
but
okay.
here
Yeah.
you needed them involved, and then you needed a network involved. Now, I had the equivalent of Blockbuster go, "Yep, we like your idea, but you have to come up with the other two." And my God, I anyway, obviously I didn't get to do it, but um, yeah. But in any case, like through that process, through making the music video, I got to meet like another mentor um, who, at the time, like I was a bit concerned about making the music video because I was sort of like, oh, like as much as I want to make music videos, I was like, is this what I want to be known for? Because I really wanted to do this animation thing over here. But anyway, people said, "Oh, you shouldn't." But then I bit the bullet, and I was like, "Fine, I want to do it," and I did it, and then that's led to other things, and so. But then when I moved to Osaka, I thought, okay, I'm gonna, as you say, like move to a new city, you lose all your contacts. But then I met Felicity through like trying to. When I came here, like I tried to because what the problem, I don't know if it's a problem, but anyway, the problem with Osaka or Kansai is there's lots of little pockets of filmmakers here, whereas like in Tokyo, it's like this really tight knit community. So what I was kind of trying to do was this monthly meetup where like trying to. I mean, obviously there was a selfish reasons. I wanted to meet everyone and see who's out there, but also I thought like oh, maybe I could try and pull people together and say like what is this Osaka or Kansai filmmaker community,
Okay.
and that's kind of had a little bit of a life afterwards, and so I've tried obviously like so getting ahead of myself again, but like like when I moved to Osaka, like everybody said like the filmmaking industries in Tokyo, you're killing what whatever my career was because like at that point I'd taken American piano to like to Cannes and it started going around the world, and it was just about to go to Toronto, and then that's when I up and left. Because I met someone I fell in love with, and so to be closer to them, I came to Osaka, and I kind of thought, well, I guess that's that's my filmmaking career done. But this is kind of where I got to make the feature film. This is where I got to you know, be on television as a, you know, travel. What do they call me? I wasn't a reporter. Um, I was like a correspondent. I think that's what they called me.
Huh.
Anyway, paid it was a nice gig, and I was really sad when that show got cancelled. But J Trip Plan, I think it's called, but a little bit hard to find on the internet now. But yeah, sorry, that's a long answer to a short
No,
question again. But
it's hearing this is it's inspiring because it sounds like you really found and well, when you moved that you
yeah,
were kind of leaving the the core film community, but you kind of made a new one where you went
yeah,
building bonds between the filmmakers there. I think that's really important, and that's something I'm always kind of going on about myself. It's just that
mm,
importance of having like-minded people who are have that shared creative purpose and finding a way to if not to work together directly, at least to support each other in spirit. I think
exactly.
Yeah.
Like, and because you will sort of want to encourage anyone who's like you're not in LA or you're not in New York or Atlanta or Toronto or one of the big filmmaking hubs. But maybe being in a smaller place gives you a uniqueness. Of course, Osaka is like a world city. It's not like I haven't moved to a backwater, but people did act like I was going to a backwater coming here because like that's kind of a mentality in Japan. It's like everybody goes to Tokyo, So
Right.
like if you go to Tokyo and then you leave Tokyo, you can't there is it's not 100% spoken directly, but there is this sort of loser mentality. Like if you've left Tokyo, it's like, well, you've washed out. But
Yeah, I think that
anyway,
attitude is sort of similar here in the sense that at least within the more
yeah.
industrial film um, practices, there is still kind of that dominance of LA and New York. But the beauty of the independent film, of
Mm,
course, is that it really can be done anywhere that people want to tell their stories and are inspired to pick up a camera. So I'm glad to hear that
exactly.
continue to do that. And in fact, he said that's really that move is really kind of what um, sparked the making of the
Mm.
feature. And was Matcha and Vanilla, was that the first, that was the first feature that you had done? That correct?
It's my first feature
Okay.
and to date only feature.
All right. Yeah.
You know, like I don't know, I'm so inspired by the folk filmmaking community, but at the same time, like I'm quite nervous to then uh to make like a folk film because um like like even though the establishment has done nothing for me, I'm still kind of that generation where like I want to be accepted by the establishment, and so like I think songs like the slam dancers of the world,
Right.
like if once you've made your second film, then um you're no longer an up and coming filmmaker,
Right.
right?
Right. It's interesting you
Whereas,
mentioning
yeah,
folk filmmaking specifically because that movement, certainly has resulted in a lot of really prolific filmmakers.
mm,
But I think I kind of share your, and perhaps it is a generational perspective, of being a little bit more, I think, coming from a more traditional mindset of production. And in a lot of ways, I've embraced the freedom, I guess, that
mm,
folk filmmaking and similar approaches to independent film can provide. But there is sort of still that part of me that is thinking more in terms of, maybe more traditional structures of film. Though I think I'm a little less. I'll say this for me. It did open up the possibility of making a feature film in the way that I was making the short films that I was making. So the short
mm,
films I was making were, of course, very, very small, DIY types of productions. But so for me, it was a matter of thinking in terms of, okay, how can I take that and just kind of expand on it to feature length? But I certainly understand your point that in your case, you're looking at a more, you're kind of still, looking to the industry. So it is yeah, I can see where it is a tension there between the two approaches. Is there anything,
uh,
I'm just curious with the short films you made, you
mm,
mentioned that, you mentioned to me in the email that
mm,
voice in my head was sort of
yeah,
inspired by the folk film ethos.
it,
Is there
it
anything
was,
you'd like to, maybe we could start talking about that one if we
yeah,
talk about it in
yeah,
relation to that.
yeah. Like I mean, the impetus for that film was that um, I sort of wanted to discover new actors. And so like like my day job as a teacher, one of my colleagues was like told me that she wanted to be an actress. And I was like, you know what? I can write you a story and let's see how you do. Rather than give you an audition, I'll just audition you by making a short film with you. And I thought, maybe I could do like that sort of Cody Clark kind of film where it's all voiceover. And, I mean, hopefully he doesn't get offended by me saying, like, it's a pretty girl with a voiceover, but pretty girl, nice location, voiceover. But, they're rather than, I didn't want to copy him. I just wanted to say, like, okay, well, these are things I could take from his work to like maybe think of something of my own.
Sure. No, it's a good
Um,
approach. I have to say I've certainly used the voiceover model myself a lot in the past because I think it's a great if you're doing a one person film, one character or whatever, it allows you to really uh, explore the whole world through the audio portion while you're seeing one thing, hearing
Exactly.
another. And so yeah, I think it's an approach that a lot of filmmakers can certainly experiment with and benefit from.
It's so smart because you sidestep all that um, the ADR problem of with the noise of
Yeah.
you know capturing sound and having it sound good. Like watching his film Mute Date, I was like, so frustrated because it's such a great idea. Like maybe is I don't know about watching it. I think it's a good film in of itself, but like watching it as a fellow like independent filmmaker, I look at that and go, "Oh, that's such a great idea."
Well, yeah, you get inspired. That's the thing, watching all these films. I mean, I know I certainly get inspired by them. I mean, I enjoy them, of course, at their own level, but also just
Yeah.
thinking about, wow, an interesting approach that is. And I mean, that was something that really struck me about Matcha and Vanilla was just visually. And I have to say, as I was thinking about this in relation to voice in my head as well, is that I
Mm,
have to say, I think you really have a talent for um, beautiful visuals that don't call attention to themselves in a way that takes you out of the film. I feel like you capture some really subtle but still very beautiful images. And I find myself really taken with. I'll be watching the background sometimes, just like a sunset or sunrise, whatever, and just really taken by how you capture that. So it's a very it's I think I would describe it as understated, but a very effective,
mm.
very beautiful
I
style.
mean, thank you. I mean that's really all Paul Laming. Like I've just because we made the music video together, and you know we've worked together since then. Like obviously he's done stuff without me, and I've done a couple of projects without him. But so like a safer place, he wasn't he wasn't the cinematographer there because I think at that point he was living in America. I want to say, um, but yeah, like because just working a lot with the same cinematographer has kind of given us that language of like because I mean I think also we like the same type of cinematography. Like I love the now I'm gonna forget his name. The Australian cinematographer that everybody likes who worked with Wong Kai Wai. Um,
Oh, Christopher
what was
Doyle?
his name?
Christopher?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, good. Yeah, exactly. So we really love that look, and I mean, partly the limitations. Try to we always try to approach the story from like what are our limitations, like let's build the story around around those limitations. So like yeah, so like if I ever become famous enough that people say like, oh, these are his Osaka Castle Park films, but literally because like that park is like next to me.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
so in order to because like Matcha and Vanilla was supposed to all be in my apartment, like it was supposed to be the kind of British kitchen sink drama. But he kept pushing me to go like, let's go to the roof, let's go outside, which of course made things more difficult. But obviously, all the scenes that people really love are the ones that are outside. So, um,
Of course, I have to
and
say to contrast that with the last Anomaly, which was
yeah,
basically animated. Did you find was that and I can't remember which one came first. Was the last Anomaly the earlier film between that and Voice in My Head?
it is the earlier
Okay.
film. Yeah, yeah. So that's technically in that went on the circuit in 22, 23.
Okay.
I want to say. Um, but that only just came out onto streaming just now, which, um, of course, I kind of knew it beforehand, but it really did hit me like a ton of bricks that like the streamers, uh, they're so narrow-minded because like like these. gay animations, short animations on YouTube will get like millions of views, but apparently they kind of die on the vine in like the streaming environment. Like I don't know why people have some weird aversion to it or they don't promote them. So yeah, that's been kind of an interesting process to see. Like we've just had it on a few platforms, but one of the platforms, like I mean, I think I'm a bit too Australian to say it, but like ooh, called it like an important addition to the LGBT film canon because it's approaching a different subject than I guess normally, but it was that was a real joy to make. I mean, that was a pandemic film because I think maybe a lot of people decided like, oh, it's a pandemic, let's do an animation, and partly because of that, um, I was able to pull in some pretty big names to
Oh,
be the
nice.
voice talent. Um, and so, like, I attempted to, like, I mean, Ross, who is from, I mean, it's not an officially an Australian film, but like, this was again my attempt to get in with the Australian establishment. Um, so, like, basically everyone's Australian who worked on it, except Ross, who is American from Savannah. I think he went to the Savannah School of Design or something, but he works out in New Zealand. So it all got made in New Zealand, and because of the pandemic, like Adam, who's Australian, but he recorded himself in LA. Damien recorded himself in his closet in Melbourne. So I don't know if Americans really understand the breadth of having like a neighbors actor in your movie, but you know, anyway, that was it. That's it's a big show. But anyway, he recorded in his closet, and Robin, I think she has a recorder, and she recorded herself in her house, and we all got to put it together. Like in some ways, like making like as a director making a animation, I felt quite I felt more like a manager rather than a director because like obviously Ross was like, should I go this direction or this direction? So I had a lot of input, but at the same time, it's different to say like being there with everyone. It was, I mean, I guess it was remote filmmaking, so
It is interesting how that possibility, of course, now exists and is easier than ever. Though there are still a lot of challenges
mm,
to it, as you say, kind of managing and coordinating all the different parts, all the moving pieces, bringing everything together. But it is great that we can so easily collaborate with people around the
mm,
world. And it's interesting too. You mentioned how that film really kind of grew out of the limitations of making a film during the pandemic. And,
yeah,
and it's interesting how that has, I think that's been behind a lot of these, you know, innovations, let's call it, in the indie film we're looking at, like even folk filmmaking. It seems like that really took
mm,
off in 2020. I think there was a lot
sure,
of ideas of people. Well, I think it was probably just having to find creative solutions to making film
mm,
under these limited circumstances. But then also, I imagine. Just a result of the connectivity that was happening. I mean, I think, for example, or at least I found your work,
mm.
we kind of connected through Twitter early
Yeah,
on,
yeah.
so I think there was
That
a lot of like discovery happening there.
definitely. I mean that's when I was doing the column like for the two gay geeks, that's how I found most of my interviewees was just like following like support indie film, like who's making films, like I think probably I found you via because I think I found Joel first, you know
Yeah. Hmm.
way before he got famous. So that was kind of that's my little claim to fame is that I got you know when he was like sub 1,000 views, sub 1,000 subscribers, when he was promoting. I found him when he was promoting island on Reddit, and I said to him the same thing I said to everyone, like, if you want to promote it, I'll interview you for the column, and um, got to interview him a couple of times before he really took off. And yeah, I think I guess I found you through Twitter. I found a lot of people that way,
Yeah.
and one, I'd just start following people, and because it's just it's really, I think that's what you're doing here with this interview series, is to sort of give back, I guess.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, I don't know, I had the stupid idea. I don't know if it's stupid, but anyway, I had the idea. It was like, oh, because to me, folk film is like a new Dogma 95. And I was like, oh, I want to be the kind of beat reporter recording all of this. So, like, I was trying to interview all of you at one point. So, because I just think it's this great movement, and I yeah, it's just very, very inspiring.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I look at a lot of these younger guys and younger filmmakers out there doing all this stuff, and I'm always kind of amazed by the pace of it. And like I said, I sort of I'm a big advocate for making the movies any way you can. So that's
Mm,
I started the YouTube channel largely as a way to kind of spotlight a lot of the films and to try my hand at it myself. And
mm,
trying to, like I said, as I was kind of trying to expand on taking short films to the next level and everything. But I will say, it's interesting talking about the push towards feature filmmaking, because
mm,
that is something I wanted to ask you about. It kind of reminded me of this, that I think
mm,
you've done some really effective short films, and I was curious uh, with the emphasis on feature films, do you have any thoughts on like the relationship between shorts and features? Do you necessarily,
mm,
I guess, do you see a difference between them, or is it simply a matter of, the length that you're telling your story? I'm curious because I can share some thoughts on this in a minute, but I was just curious what you thought. If
mm.
you feel that there's like a real difference between the formats.
There is, like, I think, I've, yeah. So, because I mean, just the sheer process of making them,
Mhm.
as you would know, like, you kind of have to kid yourself that, like, as I did before Matcha and Vanilla, it's like, well, an 80-minute film is really just four 20-minute films.
Right.
But actually, when you're making them, it's not four 20-minute films. Like, you're going from being a sprinter to a marathon runner. And like, making a feature film is, well, I mean, I guess it doesn't have to be. You can make them in a weekend and have them on YouTube within like 48 hours for some people. Mine took 5 years. Now, admittedly, some of that was the pandemic you know, uh, had extended. I think, yeah, I mean, there was like a good year where we were delayed because of not being able to do things the way we were hoping to do them. Um, it also got delayed because, like, just like those big Marvel movies, I reshot it. Like, I did like the first year's shoot, and that was supposed to be the film. But then, we did. I guess this is my mindset of the, trying to be more establishment. I did the test screenings. People said it was too depressing, so that's where I came back a year later, saved all my money up again, and we kind of added new scenes and reshot some things to make it a much lighter film, which, I mean, you've watched it, so it's not a light film, but hopefully it's a watchable film now. Like, it's not so depressing that you're like, oh, I'll never watch that again.
Well, it seems like your films take, at least the ones I've seen, really take the approach of being a character study. It seems like you really have
Yeah.
a great sense for writing characters and directing the actors in these roles. And I was wondering if you could sort of along the lines because we with the I believe it's the latest film, Safer Place. Is that the latest one that you've done?
Well, it's got a fresh coat of paint on it.
Okay.
Um, like I made it about 10 years ago as a music video, and there was kind of like a documentary aspect to it.
Okay.
And so both of those things have been merged. Again, I mean, kind of like you, where you've sort of moved a lot of your projects onto, I think it's INN or something, the
Oh
Indie
yeah, I have one film up there on that Indie Nation network. Yeah, that's how I
Indie
learned about a
Nation
lot of your
Network.
projects. I should mention that that's where I think sometimes I might get confused about the release order only because I'm seeing them as they're being released onto these streaming services. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So I've kind of moved. I've started thinking of like, oh, some of the things I've got on YouTube is like, well, how can I monetize this?
mm,
Because like at my level of not being monetized on YouTube, it's really just a kind of like showcase, right?
yeah,
So I kind of thought like, well, maybe less people will see it on a streaming platform, but I might actually make some money from it.
right.
So um,
That's good. So is
so
this like a kind of a restored or not restored, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So
revised version of
it
it? Yeah,
it's a revised version. It has new music because the music was copywritten. So it's more of a documentary now,
yeah,
which is kind of interesting. Like it, when I made it, like in 2015, 20, it was you know just before like the big kind of trans movement. And I guess now I've released it like 10 years later, where it's like kind of after that. So maybe I didn't time it correctly, but anyway, like it came out on Trans Visibility Day this year, and the so Lesflix, where it's, I mean, it's on a bunch of platforms, but
mhm,
Lesflix in particular has really promoted it. Um, like to drop another name, Naomi McDougall Jones, who wrote Wrong Kind of Women. She One of the things she advised me, I'm going to say me as if she just talked to me, but like in the article, I when I interviewed her, she was saying like how it's important. It's probably more important to have your, like, rather than have your film on Netflix where they will never promote it. Like maybe it's more important to be on like Indie Nation Network where maybe it's smaller, but because they're smaller and there's less competition, they promote it to their audience, and your film is going to be more likely to be seen. So
yeah. I mean
that's kind
that's
of been my thought process
Yeah, I was going
since
to say it's
then.
certainly how I've learned about a lot of your films. Like I said, that's why sometimes I have the release order kind of reversed because I'm seeing them as they're being released. To me, they're new to
Yeah,
me, so I've really enjoyed discovering them as I go along. So yeah, I think it's worth it putting it out
thank
there
you.
wherever you can. And that's the thing. It's they'll be new to somebody. Seeing them for the first,
Yeah.
discovering them, and it's a point that I was just talking with a friend of mine who I work
Mm,
on some films with, and something he and I are both always saying is just that with independent film at this level, where sometimes it can be hard to connect with an audience just because there are so many films out there, like you were saying, different platforms. Sometimes things don't do well on certain platforms or whatever, but the important thing is
mm,
just having the work out there for people to find. and
mm.
and so yeah, I think it's great that you're putting it on this, all these different places, and I think they're doing a good job of promoting it because I certainly see the social media
Thanks.
posts about it and things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly my thought process behind like recent the Asian movie Pulse, I think they called their
Yeah.
review of Voice in My Head said that I'd taken a step back, which I guess,
Hmm.
but then that's true. Like I did a feature film and then I've gone back to do shorts, but to me, doing shorts is like a way of experimenting with an idea or like
Right.
maybe changing. changing course. Like partly, I don't know if this seems that way to you, but like the course shift I'm trying to do at the moment is towards um, happier movies. So ones with like, because that's the feedback I got, like, from a lot of these streaming services, like, hey, thank you for making your movie, but we would really like it if you'd make a film with a happy ending. so I'm trying to, like, shift my mindset towards that. But I mean, there's also that voice in my head that's saying to me, like, oh, you really should go back to making horror because, like, because that, when with American Piano, we took it to the Cannes market, the film market there, which, I mean, obviously there's not much of a market for short film, but anyway, we used that as our little calling card to have meetings with all the sales agents. And the thing we took away from that was, like, the two people who were most interested in us were the horror sales agents and the LGBT sales agents.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
like when we made Matcha Vanilla, Paul and I were supposed to do, like, concurrently. Like, I made my LGBT film and Paul was supposed to make a horror film, but that one kind of fell apart, unfortunately. But it's still in the back of my mind. I'd like to make a horror movie. So, like, there's something I have in post production at the moment, which is, it's, I mean, like, I've been describing it as, like, it's a ghost story, but it's not a horror movie. So
Okay.
like, yeah. So I'm trying. Like, there's a part of me. It still has a kind of happy ending. Does it have anyway? I think it has a happy ending, but maybe my version of a happy ending is not other people's version of a happy ending. Um, so, but
Well, I'll say
yeah.
this
Anyway,
to real quick to get
mm,
back to talking about short film,
sorry.
kind of getting back to this earlier question about the difference with shorts and features. It's something
Mm,
that I'm still drawn to the short format, even having done the features that I've done, and they've been extremely low budget, largely
mm,
improv. I mean, working with what I've got, but I think for me, shorts kind of they allow me to do some things that because you are working on a smaller scale, things that I don't really get to do
mm,
with the features, and sometimes I miss the more traditional, fully scripted, very carefully planned shots, of the shorts. Not that you can't do that with features, of course, but I'm just saying at the level that I'm doing it,
mm.
I find that the features
Yeah,
tend to go off on a more experimental direction, whereas the shorts I can kind of go back to doing some, much more like tighter formatted, structured
yeah,
kind of filmmaking. And again, there's no reason why it has to be one or the other, but I've just found that for myself. And so for me, they kind of serve different purposes. And it sounds
mm,
like, in a way, with the voice in my head, you were sort of like going almost like going back to the basics in a way of just
mm.
telling, this story, having a character study. And like you said, it almost sounds like it allows for kind of a like a reset in some ways as you're kind of trying to go in a
Definitely.
direction. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, that's. I mean that. I mean, this is sort of, looking back, has been my method, but I haven't thought of it as a method at the time. Because, like, um, the two shorts I made after going to Cannes are Silence, and now it's called A Safer Place. Like, that was me, like, rejigging my brain to, like, okay, well, I need to make films in the LGBT space, like, because at that point, like, at Cannes, like, the big thing was, like, what's your personal connection to the story? So,
Yeah.
like, like, I'd made American Piano with Paul, which was, a true story about a Japanese girl who played the piano at a POW camp in Japan. And they're kind of like, well, what's your personal connection to the story? It's like, well, my connection to the story is that they lived near me, actually, and I was inspired by the story. So, like, um, it's also partly, like, I guess, because I'm still in that establishment mindset of, like, how do I work within this framework of, like, you have to tell a story about yourself. Like you can't tell stories about other people. So that was me attempting to move in that direction. Um, like yeah, I mean, like Last Anomaly is probably the closest I've gotten to. I guess I still find it a little bit like I I want to be a filmmaker. I don't want to be like a autobiographer. So I feel like you kind of need that step removed.
Do you feel the
I don't know if
animation
the,
provided that, you mean? Or was it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like the animation gives it that sort of step removed,
Yeah.
so it's not like that. But I don't know how. I mean, like obviously, like with folk, you're kind of in that kind of Woody Allen mode of
Mhm.
you're the star, you're the writer, you're the director. Sometimes you're even like the cameraman. Like how does that how do you wrestle with that?
Yeah, it's
I,
well, for me personally, it's not the thing that and I think it's one of the reasons I responded so strongly to it was because it's really how I've been making short films for all
mm,
so many years, and it was really just a matter for me. It was just like a matter of degrees of, like I said, expanding the time, thinking about longer films. But it did lead me towards, like I said, a more experimental approach. Like
mm,
I don't know if you remember the film I did, Endless August. I think you mentioned having seen it
it's
where I'm on
probably my
vacation.
favorite.
Oh, thank you. And
I really
there's a
like that
very
film.
extended sequence of just the waves, this very rough sea that I was filming. And
Mm,
I mean, something like that, it's like a 7 minute shot, which I would never have done in a short. But and I don't even know that I would do it again. I was just trying, I was just thinking about expanding time and and just focusing on that one image. And I had the shot, and I used it, and it was like, yeah. So I think for me, the key word for me in thinking about the folk film approach to
mm,
features is experimental. I mean, it is experimental
mm,
for me, and doing things I wouldn't do in a short. But but what you were talking about, having to kind of do it all yourself in a lot of cases, it's not that big a leap for me, but it is a challenge. I mean, it is something that you find yourself. Well, like I was just saying to someone the other day, that about acting. I was talking with another filmmaker actually. He asked me about acting in my own films,
mm.
and I said that it was something I've always done out of necessity, but sometimes would like to be able to write for other people, not having to just figure, oh well, I'm going to be in this one too.
That's
But
right.
but the
Got to
thing is,
write because you got
y-
to write to your own strengths. But I guess
yeah,
I do that as well because I tend to, I guess, because at my level, which is basically the same level, right? Uh, I try to think again, like, what are my limitations? Like, who am I going to cast in this? How do they act? What are their strengths? Let's write for this person.
yeah. If you can
Although
do that, that's
the problem with that is because it's not yourself.
Mhm.
Is that if they're not available?
Right.
So, like, I wrote a web series which was supposed to be after Matcha and Vanilla, but because it was the pandemic, I was like, well, we can't really do a musical because it's all those things that we can't do in the pandemic. And now she's gone and moved back to America. So it's like, well, how do I rewrite it for someone else? Like,
Yeah, it's
with
great if you
very
have some.
specific,
Yeah, I was just gonna
yeah.
say it's great if you have someone in mind that you can write a part for and really draw on their strengths and knowing the types of characters they can play. And in my case it usually, that does come back to myself. But yeah, if you can find that with people, and that they're available, then yeah, that can be a great
Mm,
way of working. And it's I don't know, the challenges of casting are something I am always struggling with, because and partly, especially if you're doing like an improv style type film where things are really far out there, you a friend of mine said that the key word in that filmmaking situation, and it's probably true of all filmmaking
mm,
situations really, but especially with that kind of experimental improv, that key word is trust. You really have to
yeah.
trust that, this may not be the usual way of doing things. It may not even make a lot of sense when you're just seeing the bits and pieces of it, but you have to trust that when it's put together, there is a vision there is a concept that's going to hold it together. And it can be really intimidating when you're
Mm,
going into a film without the structure that a fully scripted project can provide.
That's true. I mean, like Matcha and Vanilla, we use soft, like a kind of a soft, I can't say the word, soft scripted it.
Mhm.
So, like, like everything that happened was, written out, but the dialogue wasn't.
Oh, okay.
So, like occasionally there'd be specific things I'd be like, I want you to say this in this scene. But yeah, so basically that was all improv as well.
Well, I
Like,
think that worked really
although,
well. I think
yeah,
you did a really
yeah,
good job with it. Yeah.
like one of the challenges, I guess, of like say, um, obviously Japanese is not my native language, so like American Piano we wrote in English, and then we had it translated to Japanese, and then we recorded it that way. But then, like sometimes the actors would say like, "Oh, we wouldn't really say it this way; we'd say it like this." So it would have to be changed
I see.
on set. So, like in my mind, like the way to solve that problem was like, right, I won't write any dialogue whatsoever. You guys can say it to each other, and I'll just say like, okay, this is where you start, this is where you end, and you know, go for gold, basically.
Hmm.
And I'd
Yeah.
sort of like I'd tell them the story of the scene. Like obviously they read the whole thing, and like this is how I kind of want you to do it. But I don't know, like I read uh, Directing Actors by, is it Judith somebody or other? Like that was just prior to making the last Anomaly, because I was like, oh, I've got to direct all these like big name actors in Australia, and so I was like, oh, I've got to be a proper director now. So like if I'd remade Matcha Vanilla, I probably would make it totally differently now. But at the time, that was how I viewed it, of like, this is the story, this is the emotion. Um, but apparently I was over directing it. So so yeah, so the like Voice in My Head and Last Anomaly are two films I've made since reading that book, where like trying to do something different. But yeah, the last short film I made was all scripted, and there's a challenge to that, I guess, because of maybe the limited time. Because obviously, with when it's all improv, you can kind of make it in a much shorter period of time.
That's true. The improv definitely allows for, I mean, it is such a different approach. And if you have, two people or three people, however many you're working with that are
Mm,
comfortable with it, it can really, it is, yeah, a very different experience. I mean, there's no way I could have done, the last couple of features, especially as a scripted film. I mean, but they had to arise out of very specific circumstances where the improv was not only possible but effective. I think I at least I hope
mm,
it was, But yeah, again, it for me it really came down to who I was working with that made that possible. Um, it's funny. There was something I was going to say about
mm,
that with the talking about the voice in my head. It reminded me
mm,
now that I've been thinking about it. And you were talking about the with the use of voiceover and the scripting of the voiceover. It reminds me of a project that I was involved in about 15 years ago called the
mm,
Majestic Micro Movies. And this was a project by a screenwriter, Lloyd Fonvier, who has a number of uh, Hollywood credits, but at this
yeah,
point he was writing these short scripts for independent filmmakers that he knew, and they were conceived of as how to do basically short form storytelling for the web. Because at this time he was at that time around this was around 2010, he was thinking about how YouTube specifically was, could move away from like the viral video
mm,
to a more structured short form narrative. And in thinking
mm,
about this, I mean, that's something like the micro movie format is something I've continued to work with a lot. In fact, when the everything kind of first shut down with the pandemic, I made about 7 or 8 little micro movies,
that's right.
very much in that same style. It was like me and voice and a voiceover that I was
Mm,
doing. And so I think that approach is, it is really interesting, and I think I'm trying to remember now exactly what you said that reminded me of it, but I think it was just something about how a short film, I guess because we're it's less time, sometimes you can
Mm.
do a much more structured script than you can with a
Yeah,
I guess that's what
because
reminded
like
me of it. But
yeah, because I think there's what I miss, I guess, as an artist. When if you want to do a drawing, like you don't have to ask anybody for permission. You
right,
just do it.
yeah,
So like I wanted to do like that. I think that's one thing that the folk film was inspiring me was like, well, maybe I can approach this as like I've got this idea. I want to make it. So that's kind of where we moved into those radio plays, as I was mentioning before we started recording on the Fizz and Fizz Popcast. So which is where the last Anomaly originally. I had that sort of thought in my head of like sounding very Kate Bush, but like the guy doing a deal with God to save his partner. And so that was that was the basis of the conversation. And I was like, well, eventually I was like, okay, I'm just going to write this down.
yeah,
And so I said to my podcast partner, Beck, like, oh, I'd like to do this for the podcast. And she was like, no, I think you need to make this as a short film. Like you need to actually do this. And she suggested that it should be like an animation. I was like, okay, well, I know who to get. So, because through one of the first people I interviewed, I don't know if you'd call it a folk film, but anyway, he released it on the internet. It's called, so Ross's film was called, what was it? Oops, I killed the person I likes. It's got,
great title.
so it's a great title. And
Yeah.
like, it's it was based on the play that inspired Macbeth, and so like I watched it and I watched his animation style, and so I was like, oh, I've got to interview this guy, and eventually I kept him I was keeping him in the back of my mind. So I'd like to do something with him someday.
Yeah.
So then that was kind of the impetus of like, hey, let's do something together, and it's now become this little short film, The Last Anomaly. So like that the podcast, the the column, like and now like I mean this conversation is all thanks to the column. Like, like because partly, with the column, like to say to any introvert out there, like that was my way of networking without having to go to parties.
Right.
So because like I because like it's much easier to approach a person that you want to talk to by saying, "Hey, I want to promote your work. Like, let me
Yeah.
interview you, and I'll promote your work," rather than like, "Hi, I'm Hamish."
Well,
Like it.
I think it was a great idea because and any I mean it's one of the things I'm trying to do with this is just
Mm,
to give people a platform to come on and talk about their work, to meet new filmmakers and just get the word out about the movies because yeah at this level we it means a lot when somebody
right.
you know can do that, and so I really try to, like you were saying earlier, I think about kind of being like a form of almost like giving back, and that's the thing is I just I know sometimes like in the past when I was starting out making films, I wish that there had been more ways to connect with people, but also to get the word out about the films. And so, I'm happy to do that here, and I think you certainly
Mm,
did that with your column, and and thank you, of course, because you did a nice interview about my film, The Payoff, back in 2021. So that was much appreciated, a big boost, and while I was really happy we could talk on here. When I was starting this, you were one of the first people I thought of that I wanted to
well,
have on.
thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I mean, I know it's. especially with the the internet, I think it's hard to keep creating reasons to talk about your film because
Hmm.
I think from a marketing perspective, like one of my old um, marketing bosses used to say that people need to hear about something 5 times before they'll take any action. And so, the trouble with YouTube is like you share it and then that's it,
Yeah,
so you kind of, and that's just that one step. Like you actually need the four more steps. So, that was partly my way of like helping people create another step where they can say, hey, like, here's my film. Then the next step is like, hey, here's an interview with me about the film. So then people can read it and go like, well, hey, I feel more connected to this person. Maybe I'll spare the time to actually check out their work. So I don't
yeah,
know. That's kind of that's for filmmakers watching that was the thought process behind um, this kind of thing. And I kind of saw it as I don't know if people realize that's what I was doing, but basically it was the questions I asked were questions that people have to ask themselves when writing a press release. So I kind of thought, well, maybe if while writing this, people can start thinking like, oh, well, this would be my press release, and I'll just use that content and then send it out to you know, other outlets where potentially they can take it and then reformat it and get your name wrong and mess everything up. It's like, I gave you my name. All you have to do is copy and paste. How did you misspell my name?
it is so
But they
important.
do.
Yeah, it is so important for filmmakers, indie filmmakers especially, to
Yeah.
really get out there and
Mm-hmm.
to get comfortable promoting their own work and talking about,
Right.
as I always say, that you just can't expect anyone to be able to find it.
No,
I mean, it could be the greatest film in the world, but if no one can find it, they're not going to see it. They're not going to hear about it.
no. I
No.
mean, but that is a nice thing that I think you guys are doing with those playlists of like,
Oh
hey,
yeah.
these are some films you should check out. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I think Dan Lotz and a lot of those other guys, they're really leading all the charge on that. I'm sort of a supporter from the kind of from the sidelines. I certainly am a big advocate for making the films any way you can, and
Mm,
I've certainly participated myself with some of these. But yeah, those guys are the ones really out there. I think they're creating those playlists out on YouTube and talking about the folk filmmaking as a movement and all that stuff. So yeah,
mm,
they're really leading the charge. I'm sort of a uh, supporter from the sidelines. Is kind of how I see it. Supporting, but also of course
mm.
any independent filmmakers out there. It's not just folk films for me. It's anybody out there telling their story,
That's
however they
right.
can, making their movies with whatever tools we have. So I really,
Mm,
try to support all of it. And I think it's great that there's so many opportunities now to see these movies that otherwise, you know, may not have been released at all. I mean, I think about
that's
all the
right.
great indie films from the '90s that uh, have become unavailable just through one reason or another. And there's just
Right. Like
hopefully things
Dogma.
will live out on YouTube or out on the internet as long as they can. So yeah, I like to
Definitely.
get behind and support all of it. Is there anything we can? I know we've been on for about an hour, so I
Sorry.
really appreciate your time
Sorry.
here. I wanted to. We can certainly wrap up if you'd like, and
Mm.
but I did want to give you an opportunity to either plug any new projects you've got coming up, and certainly to tell us where we can find your work.
Um, well, if you look at, I'll give you my linked tree and please look down below. That'll have all the links. Otherwise, I'm the most famous Hamish Downie there is on the internet. So if you put my name into Google, you will find me. So you know, there's my Yeah, so my YouTube channel has my projects about the golden age films, and so Matcha and Vanilla is on Gaga Ooh La La. It's you can type it how it's exactly how it sounds, um, and yeah, so yeah, what we're talking about today, voice in my head, and a safer place there, and a last anomaly. They're all on a new service called Short Film Gem. So the nice thing that they've done, it's supposed to be like a curated Criterion collection for short films, and so they wrote a really nice review for the last anomaly, which was yeah just so wonderful to read, and so yeah, they're of course available on well, last anomaly being gay, it's not on Lesflix, but you know the voice in my voice in my head's not on there yet. Um, so it's hard to know when things will get released. Anyway, check out the link tree because that'll have all the updated information.
Great. I'll make
Yeah,
sure to put that in the description of this video and anywhere else that the interview is published.
sorry.
All right.
But yeah, and you know, thank you very much for doing this. You know, I love your channel. I was so grateful that you reviewed Matcha and Vanilla. That was a really lovely review, and you know, I love what you're doing, and I'm glad that you've like got the bug again. You know, it seemed like you took some time off for a while, and I'm
Yeah,
glad that
I had
you've
some
come
projects
back.
I was working with yeah, but yes, it's back, and you know I really am looking forward to doing more of these interviews, and hopefully at some point down the road, if you have a new project, I'd love to have you back on to talk about that.
Anytime, anytime. And
Great.
yeah, if you want to talk about a golden age film, come on my channel.
Sounds good.
So anyway, thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you, Hamish. I appreciate your time, and it was great speaking with you.
Great speaking with you too. Thank you.